Well, good evening, everybody. Thank y'all for taking the time to come chat with us a little bit and listen to what our consultants have and what staff has with our Unified Land Development Plan and the upcoming updates to that plan. I know folks have different levels of experience, if you will, with the code and these applications and so on, but it is, of course, far-ranging and far-reaching for everyone here in Floyd County. So just briefly, I'm Artegas Newell, I'm the planning director, and several staff here from the planning department here. Bryce Wood, senior planner, Ted Edwards, the GIS administrator, are here. And so we want to just, again, welcome y'all for taking the time. So Brian and Bill Wright are here from Town Planning Urban Design Collaborative, and Claire Morris is going to be joining us via Zoom from TPUDC as well. So just make yourselves comfortable. Housekeeping real quick. Restrooms are just right behind you here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian and get us started.
All right. So thank you for coming. No zoning isn't always the most exciting topic. So I appreciate you giving the evening to talk about zoning. So I'm Brian Wright, and got to the privilege of leading a presentation tonight for all of you. We're going to go through it quickly, and most importantly, get to the end so we can do Q&A, answer questions, chat, because we are really just getting started. We're trying to, learn from the community. We're not from around here, so I'll jump right in and we can get going. So as Artegas said, that's me. I'm the principal of Town Planning Urban Design Collaborative. Bill Wright is my father, so we have the same last name. He is a land use attorney and expert in zoning. Claire Morris, who's on Zoom and is managing all the people who are online participating tonight, is the project manager. And Jessica Wilson is going to work on the project, as well as our graphic designer, Gortza. So we came from Franklin, Tennessee this morning, and so that's kind of our living laboratory. We've got a great historic downtown like you all do, and so it's really nice to come to a place that has that charm and character. We work all over the country, and these are just a few of the dots. We have more dots than that, and not every place we go has charm and character to work with. And so they're like, can you please help us make this charming character from nothing, and so it's, when we come to a place like this, we get excited. It makes our life easier because we can point at places. We can say, what do you love the most about your city? And rather than saying the next city over, or you could say, oh, we love this or that. So we've been starting to learn a little bit, but we get to write these zoning ordinances all around the country. We also do comprehensive plans. We do downtown plans. We work for private developers as well, which comes in handy when we're working on a project like this, because we know as the community is looking to the future, where have you come from, where are you going, everything that's been done here over the years, the parts of the city and county that you love the most were done by developers for a large part, some of them by individual property owners, but knowing and understanding and speaking their language has always come in handy when we're doing these projects. So that's important. So while we get to work all over the country, we can see all these cool places and see what issues other places have, or what things are doing really well. So we kind of have this national experience. For us, the most important part of the team is the community, right? And so that's why we do this process. It's open, it's transparent, and we hope that our numbers grow over time. So the room, later on through the process, I want seats all the way to the back walls, and we count on all of you to get the word out and make sure people know we're doing this, because shoot, we're only just figuring out the future of the city and the county here. No big deal, right? And again, remember, we're not from around here, so we need the community to make sure we don't move things up. We want to make sure it ends up like we want it at the end of the day. So we find that you all are really the experts on this place that we can never be. We'll learn things about the city and the county that you don't know, and we'll teach you about it, just because our perspective on things, planning and zoning, and so that'll hopefully be helpful for all of you. But we're really here. It's like an impartial third party to say, what are you looking for? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be? How do you want to look and feel, all of that stuff. And we don't have any preconceived notions, you know, so we come to town and say, hey, what's going on? What's the vibe here? In every place we work, and say, oh, well, you know, there's some people want this and some people want that. And we say, okay, great. Now let's figure out like, what are the pros and cons of both of those things, rather than having, you know, any statement. So that's helpful. Pop quiz real quick. How many zoning districts are there in the city and county currently? Anybody want to guess?
10.
Well, sold. Oh, all right, good. I'm glad y'all at least some people. So I think there's 15. Now I said I think, but that's right. So when was your current zoning ordinance adopted?
1955.
Okay, great. 2001, so close. So the reason that I ask you these questions, right, is I hope that through this process, you will not feel the need to know everything about your zoning laws. What happens is we come to town and people who've never thought about zoning before in their lives, all of a sudden feel like they need to, like, oh my gosh, when we're talking about the new zoning laws, I better read it. And they get about 5 pages in. You know, it's not just yours here, it's everywhere we work, right? It's just not normally made for regular people to look at. And so it's tricky. Now, so here's the way that I think, there's my analogy, right? So what's going on in this picture? So there's 2 things that would be happening. One is, if you could see their faces, the pilot may be going, oh my God, you know, they're crashing, right? Or they could just be going, however, we're coming in for landing and everything, no problem, right? So what I always say is, when you get on an airplane, there's only a few things you need to know, right? You need to know where you're trying to go, like what's your destination, what time's your flight, what seat you're sitting in, maybe most importantly, where's the bathroom, right? So you can make sure you don't sit too close to it, so you don't get off the plane smelling like cherries, you know, right? And so you've got this going on, and those are the only things you really care about. You're not pulling out of the little pocket in the seat in front of you, like the manual for how to fly the airplane. You're going to trust that the pilots know what they're doing, right? And the flight attendants are going to help you if you need help, all of those things. So what I want to do is make sure you don't feel the pressure to become a pilot or a zoning expert through this process, okay? That's not to say just, you know, trust us, because I've already started off by saying we need you all to help us make sure that the zoning reflects what you want to be in the future. But you don't have to go learn every little thing about it. Find the things that are important to you, find things that are relevant to you, and focus on those things and ask us great questions about that. Because I promise, if you start trying to read through it and trying to understand, especially since we're updating it, now you've taken all the time to understand what you have now. Now we're about to change it all, and now you're going to have to understand, you know. So as much as you want to become a zoning expert, that's fine. Just don't feel like you have to participate in the process. Okay? So let's start off by teaching you something about zoning there, just in case. So I'm going to pretend like none of you know anything about zoning. So if you already are experts and you know how to fly the zoning plane, just bear with me. We'll get to the more advanced stuff later, but we're going to go to kindergarten for a minute. So zoning starts off with a comprehensive plan, right? So it's a higher level document. And the comprehensive plan is a long-range policy document with a planning horizon looking into the future. It's got a vision for the future of the city and county, have policy guidance for growth and development, and you know, the actions that focus on implementing that vision. Pause 1 second. Hey Claire, can you hear me okay?
Yep, all good.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm just imagining her. We can't hear anything you're saying. There's people online. So anyway, so that's the comprehensive plan. And so that's just a vision though, right? It says, here's where we want to go. And it's good. You have one. And so we can use that as our starting point, jumping off point. And so specifically what yours talks about, there's a few of the goals. This isn't everything. It's a very robust document. So livability is something that's talked about in there, creating livable, equitable communities throughout the county. Mobility, ensuring that transportation networks meet everyone's needs and expectations. Economic vitality, talking about fostering an environment where businesses can grow and industries can thrive. And then preservation, preserving historic, cultural, and natural resources. And so, you sometimes you might think, well, if we're going to foster an environment where businesses can grow and industries can thrive, now we're talking about preservation of natural resources, cultural resources. So everything we do, we have to strike a balance, right? It's not one thing or the other. And so as we go through this process, and there's something that you're interested in, concerned about, afraid of, excited about, never think of it as a yes and a no, right? Think of it as like, okay, well, what do we need? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? Does this help us do that? And then we'll figure out together what the best path is for the rules and regulations of zoning. So what is zoning? So zoning really just groups land into different geographical areas or zones, right? And with different rules about what you can build there, what uses you can have in each of those zones. And so it's just a rule book, right, for what you can and can't do. And then also, a lot of times people are concerned when you're making zoning changes that you're causing something to happen. And zoning doesn't actually cause anything to be built. It really just guides and limits what people can build in the different zones. Okay. And so as we go forward, our part of our process is actually look at, after we hear what you're looking for, we'll look at different areas around the city and county. We'll actually draw some specific plans for those areas so you can see when, if you're, like some of these ideas in the comprehensive plan, what does, livability look like in this physical manifestation? So this is what a livable neighborhood could look like, right? And so we draw that and you can go like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I love that. Or, that does not feel like Rome-FLOYD kind of me. By the way, I'm sure I'll forget to say it correctly, Rome-FLOYD, Floyd-Rome. So
Just say Rome, yeah.
is it okay?
No, we need Floyd.
See, exactly, right? There we go. So
Just Steve.
this is like the groom side and the bride side here, right? Okay.
You can say Greater Rome.
Greater Rome, all right. Rome is greater, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Cave Springs too. So zoning can create a place like this. And as I said, some places we work, they've never seen a place like this. You guys have some places like this around, but it can also make places like this. This place is not caused because there was no zoning. It was zoning made that happen. And looking back at it now, they may have been excited when they got Best Buy. They may have been excited when they got Circuit City, and oops, Best Buy took Circuit City out from this, and that's gone. But now we've got a place that looks like this because we were trying to attract Best Buy and Circuit City and all of these things. They have the things that we need and want and love. And at the end of the day, this probably isn't the place where people bring their friends and family when they come to visit them, right? They take them here. Hopefully it's not the next town over. So here's what zoning normally does. Across America, this is what you did after World War II. You said, well, that's when we made the great places, the historic areas. And then World War II happened and said, we really love cars. Let's focus on them for a while. And so the zoning was set up to separate those uses. So we have all these sort of pods. Look at a map, it's like commercial pods, and we've got office pods, and residential single family pods, and residential multifamily pods, and schools are even pods. Sometimes you can't tell, is it a school or a prison? We're not sure, and so this is what it used to look like, right? This is what people used to do. And again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but you may have forgotten about it. You may not have thought about it this way. All the uses were intermingled depending on where you were in the community, right? And so here around the village green, you've got a church, civic use, you've got a building that's mixed use and commercial on the ground floor, and maybe the shop owner is living above. You've got some row houses, and and that's for people who want to be in the middle of things. They want to be where the action's at, right? If that's not for you, that's too lively and too exciting, then you live down the street down here and you're off the square. You don't have any commercial, so it's single family, detached housing normally. Not for you, even go further. It's bigger lots, houses are set back further. You don't even have to see your neighbors if you don't want to. And if you're really like antisocial, there's a place for you too, right? And that's okay. There's something for everyone. Well, look at this. If this person wanted to, they really could walk right there. Well, there's probably a trail. You could walk right through there. And so that's the way we used to do things. Once we started separating things and not really caring about the physical form of things, we felt it really makes sense because that other thing is really not like my thing. It doesn't look like my thing. It's not attractive. And so then all of a sudden now you have in the real estate industry, you end up like, what do I sell? Okay, well, everything looked about the same in these pods. Now, granite countertops, we got better finishes inside, we got better materials, or, maybe, I know, exclusivity, right? And so now we're going to put up gates. And we say, well, this neighborhood costs this much money. And that neighborhood costs a different amount of money. And you wouldn't want to live over there, would you? Because I've got houses selling here, right? Nothing against developers or real estate industry. Like I said, we work for them. But this is what happened when you quit having community and charm and character to sell. You had to sell these sort of more superficial things. And then you even started selling things that began to work against sort of cohesion as a society, right? Because what you find is in this pod that costs this much and that pod that costs that much, actually people they're people you work with. It's like one neighborhood might be the boss and the other might be the employee. One might be the school teacher and one might be the child that they're teaching. And they're not enemies. They have no need for the gate, no need for the fortification. No one's, trying to ransack the neighborhood, but that's what you're left to sell, right? So this is like diagrammatically the difference, okay? So there are a few fundamental principles in the design of places that people love. So they tend to be walkable. And we know that the average American is willing to walk about 5 minutes, which happens to be 1,320 feet or a quarter mile. Once you get 6 minutes, forget about it. I'm driving, no way. That's what happens. And it's funny because that's we say average, because depending on where you are, people are more hardy. You're out in Colorado, they're like, oh yeah, we can walk, no worries. Some other places they're like, it is hot here, and everywhere that we go is all about the cars. So there's only that one little walkable area, so I'm not going to walk as far. They tend to be more compact, and so the land is used more efficiently. So you're able to actually conserve land elsewhere. It's not conserved in front lawns. It's conserved in parks and green spaces and greenways. There tends to be mixed use, so you can get kind of your average, your daily needs met. Like if you run out of bread or something, you can easily walk and get it. You're probably not going to do all of your shopping for the week or for the month there and sort of walk it all home from Costco or whatever. But if you run out of something, you can go get it. And there tends to be a diversity of housing types, of income levels, people, all sorts of things. And so that's the way places used to be built. And so you can see at the bottom of the image here, this little cartoon, these are the pods. So here's the working pod, here's the shopping pod, here's the school pod, and here's kind of the spaghetti of housing. But what you'll notice is that this collector road that goes through here, every single thing that you're trying to do, you have to get on this collector. You want to go from here to working pod, you got to go here on the collector, come out, and get to school, got to get back in the collector. So you're adding all of this traffic over and over and over. And so on the top of the image, what you see is the neighborhoods used to have interconnected streets, the grid all connected. It's great for public health and safety. So if you kind of fight a fire and there's an accident over here, you can get around a different way. And you actually never have to get on the collector road unless you want to go to the next town over or to the next neighborhood over, whatever. It's all connected in here. And so these places that we actually, we love, when I ask people, when you show people when they come, oh, we go downtown, walk around downtown, where else? Downtown. And so it has actually a functional benefit too. So that's we have these different traffic patterns that you don't get all the congestion that you see in other places. Now, a lot of times though, what you start to see is because of your development pattern outside of the downtown, it starts impacting your traffic in the downtown because it's more like this. So each of these developments is practically its own cul-de-sac, even though there's a zillion houses on it, right? And so they all have sort of one entrance onto the main road. So what we're going to do through the process is, one, learn, do you want this or this? Well, remember, I said it's not either or, right? Because you realistically, when a city, county gets a certain size, you can't have all of this because it's just so much. I mean, at the end of the day, if you took all of your more suburban, development that follows this pattern and transformed it into all of that, it would be, 50 times the size of your historic downtown core. I don't know, it's a lot. So what you tend to see is a focus on certain areas. Maybe you want to make them more walkable, and other areas are more auto oriented, hopefully not like the Best Buy and Circuit City version of that. But we want to think through how much of which do you want, if any, and so we want to hear about that. And so the way that we're going to do that is start to modernize and update the zoning. So our general approach to updating and modernizing the code is trying to protect the most loved parts of the city and the county, right? And so as if I says the downtown, we want to protect it, we want to goof it up, and make sure that whatever happens there is going to be in keeping with that character, continues on that pattern. We want to enhance areas that need improvement. And so, we always look at different areas, and people say, well, that Circuit City and Best Buy area, and Circuit City's gone, and now that strip center over there is empty, or the mall's dead, or whatever the case may be. What do we do? And so we can change that and enhance that. One of the most important things that we're asked to do by the citizens, by developers, by staff in every city we work in, is to help please create a predictable outcome, so we know what to expect. So we don't have to be afraid every time somebody's going to do development that we're going to hate it. And so you do that by making sure that you have an outcome in mind when you're writing the rules. The outcome comes from comprehensive plan, vision there, and the input that we receive from the community through this process. And that's why it's so important to participate. Then we also want to really create something for everyone and in its right place, right? And so we hear all the time people say, working communities, but say, well, we're all about 1 acre lots. We're a single family house kind of a city. And then their kids say, Mom and Dad, not me. I guess you don't want me to come back here, right? And so people get in this mindset. We're working in one community up in New Hampshire, and New England is aging faster than, they age individually at the same rate, but their population is aging faster than the rest. And so they are, they're saying, well, we're this 1 acre zoning kind of a place. Don't even think about changing it. We don't, even though we can look next door and see these cool villages and charming, like the picture I showed, that's not us. Well, I did a little research, and I learned why they have 1 acre zoning. And I said, do you all know why you have 1 acre zoning? Well, that's what we like. I said, no, actually, the reason you have 1 acre zoning is because that is the minimum lot size you can put septic on in this community. And so you basically planned your whole quality of life and character on kind of what happens when you flush the toilet, right? So that was a new thing for them. And then furthermore, when they got to the point where they could no longer take care of their house, their yard, they didn't want to, and they couldn't afford to have somebody come into their house and help them, they had to leave the town because there was nothing else. They had fought against it for their whole life, and it just hadn't occurred to them. And so it took an outsider coming and showing them these things and saying, hey, what about this? And they go, oh, okay, maybe some of that, maybe not, like don't have to change everything, but maybe we have a little bit of the stuff, because most people can walk 20 years longer than they ought to be driving. So now all of a sudden you're not just trapped, hey, we're going to send you off to the home in the next town over, by the way, not even in your town, and you're trapped there unless the little bus is going out. And so if we get you in the village center, you can go walk around and have that freedom and flexibility for 20 years longer. So start thinking about lifelong communities, right? So something for everyone, different price points, different ages, and all of these things. And so we want to also try to balance the different modes of transportation, right? Because I haven't been very many places where people aren't concerned about traffic. They say, well, if we grow, we're going to get traffic. Say, well, maybe, but what if it's people walking? What if it's biking traffic? And so is that bad? No, I'm mad, but I don't want to sit in a traffic jam. So, okay, well, good. Let's make sure we don't continue that pattern of development that's giving us the traffic jams. Maybe we can grow and mitigate and offset those impacts that everyone will see, as negative. Sometimes other shop owners don't mind, by the way, if you slow down in downtown and sit in traffic. You're like, oh, I never knew we had a store there. That's so cool, And so you have a little bit of that, it's okay. So I like to think of it as slow flow for the downtown, right, for the main streets. So the other thing we want to do is enhance economic viability of the community. And so what we're seeing is there's this moment where, for a while, planners have been talking about all of these different design philosophies and principles that were just based on the way everybody built and, designed places that people love the most. And there was a few people who thought that was really great and they want some of that. And, and so some of this development would occur that followed these design principles. But for the first time now, when communities are working and saying we want to attract new talent, creatives, we want to attract millennials, all of these things. And then a lot of times they're saying, I want my kids to come back home, right? Not maybe not at home, but back to hometown, right? And so we want to find a way to attract those people, and you do that by creating the habitat for them. And the habitat of all the people that I hear saying we want to attract are these really cool places that follow these design principles of most loved places. The thing that's awesome about it is they also work well for people who aren't in high-paid tech jobs. They work really well for people who don't have access to cars. Like, right, if you're in a community and you don't have a car, you can't afford a car, you don't want a car, which, by the way, young people these days, it's like, oh, driving, no way, right? It's not cool. So if you're in a community where you have no other option but to drive, you are stuck or you can't live there, right? And so we want to, it's really nice because you can enhance the economic viability of the community, make yourself more competitive against other places around that are doing these things, and really, serve a lot of different people at different stages of life, different income levels, et cetera. And then also want to make it where the code is easy to administer. And so when you come in and you see you're a developer or landowner, you say, what can I do with my property? And maybe you don't get the most direct answer, right? And it's not just because somebody's trying to be vague. It's like, well, there's some room for improvement in the document. And so we're going to seek to really sort it all out. So there's not a bunch of subjectivity, a bunch of things that are not clear. We want to make it where anyone can understand it, not just the developer and their high-priced consultants. Just the homeowner can look at it and say, like, oh, here's what I can do. Okay, cool. This is great. Because a lot of times people actually have value in their property that they don't even realize. Like we're doing a really cool neighborhood reinvigoration plan in Franklin. And so it's this really cool historic neighborhood called Hard Bargain. And it is, it's about 6 blocks. It's, exclusively lower income. It's like 1 block away from $1 million historic homes, and it's really one of the only affordable neighborhoods in the city. And so it's, really important. And so, as we were working on that, we realized that a lot of the lots there were super deep, very, very long, like twice as long as you might need. And so we realized, like, oh, wow, what if we set it up where somebody could actually take the back of their lot and turn it into a second lot, and that lot faced what was the alley, now that becomes a little street, and now those homeowners can capture that value. They were so excited. There's people that lived in the neighborhood for 5 generations. They're like, wow, we had no idea. That's just, the back. We don't do anything with it. That's, and so there's some making it accessible to everyone by making it easy to use and understand becomes helpful. So our process is, one, talking to the community, hearing what people are looking for, but we want to make sure we're not arbitrary. We, at the end of the day, when somebody says, well, why is the setback in this zone, X number of feet? Right now, because most people just pick up the zoning as, and they're like, well, it's like that when I got here. That's like the answer. And even people who are here, sometimes if they, evolved in the last version of it, it's kind of like, well, somebody said 10 and he said 15, so let's split it and we'll, like, well, we just sort of compromise. And so that's how we came up with it. Well, what we want to do is we actually want to go and study. So we're going to go out and do what we call synoptic surveying. We're going to go to all the places where you tell us, like, these are the best examples of this is a great street. This is a great neighborhood. We love this. We love that. We're going to go out there and we're going to measure. There you'll see us, take pictures of things, documenting. So we can say, hey, the most loved parts of the city and county have these characteristics. So we're going to go take a DNA sample, basically, of all these different places, and infuse that into the new code. And so that's an important process for us as well. Then we also look at your existing zoning districts and say, okay, well, so many times when we come to a community, we look at the zoning districts and there are a lot. And, you know, 15 is really the right number. That's not too terribly many, but we go places sometimes and we say, what is B1 and B2? And they say, oh, well, that's bakery zone 1 and bakery zone 2. And I say, what's the difference in those bakeries? Oh, well, that bakery has donuts and that one has bagels. I'm like, aren't they both round with a hole in the middle? And isn't it just baked goods, right? And so it's like over the years, like zoning just gets so bloated, and it's like some contentious application came through, and there's a huge fight, and the solution is, well, all right, let's just make a new zone. That'll solve the problem, right? My favorite one is backyard chickens. Y'all ever argue about backyard chickens here? Okay, so here's the backyard chicken story in one community we were working in. So you couldn't have chickens on a lot that was less than 1.6 acres. So where did 1.6 come from? And they said, well, when those two people came and they were fighting about it, the person had 1.5 acres, and we knew that then they couldn't have chickens anymore, so we made it 1.6. And I'm like, seriously, that's not how to do zoning, right? Do we want chickens or not? Maybe the zoning says no roosters, right? Because we don't want crowing. But we all like eggs, and you know, who knows? So however that gets sorted out. So we go through look at your existing zoning districts, and we start to find ways to simplify it and organize it in a way that is much more rational. And the fewer zones, the better. The average human can take in about 6 variables at a time before their mind is blown, right? And so if we could get down to like 6 zones, that's an ambitious goal. But at some point during the Planapalooza, I'll tell you about that in a minute, I'll explain to you how you could do it theoretically. So at the end of the day, we work on revising the existing zoning, you know, what's good about it, what needs to move forward and carry on. And then we look at new zoning districts that are based on the concept of character as your primary concern rather than uses. So looking at character, what does this place feel like? What does this area feel like? What is the vibe of this? How does that? Because if you're looking at the character, you're then able to actually say, oh yeah, that reminds me of this area that we liked. You sent us to, we got that DNA sample from. And so character becomes really important in the process. And those things put together will, you know, generate the new code. And so this is actually a spread, 2-page spread from one of our zoning ordinances. If you've ever looked at a zoning ordinance, they don't normally look like this. They don't have artist renderings and photographs of cool places and, you know, 3D models and, well, here's all the setbacks and stuff though. That's in there. But in case you're going, what the heck is a side setback? Oh, C? Oh, there's C. I see it. That's C. I get a side setback now. That makes sense to me. We're talking about how the height of a building is measured. You wouldn't believe the number of ways you can measure height. Every place seems to do it different. So we'll have, you know, have a diagram that says from here to here, and you measure, and they'll have a description and explain it. And over here, this is like for inspiration to say, like, if you're going to do something in this zone, here's what we hope it looks like. Here's some pictures of things that we're talking about. So not everyone's walking in with a different idea of what the heck it is this zone means, right? So that becomes important to make it clear and compelling. So what we've learned so far, we've been talking to a few people around town, getting the lay of the land a little bit. So we asked people, what do you like the most? Downtown, top of the list. Number 1 answer, downtown, right? Berry College, football stadium, the idea that you're a regional hub for healthcare and education events. Landscape standards, increase tree canopy, air quality, provide energy savings, a small town feel, due to lack of connectivity with the interstate. So that's interesting. And Franklin is sort of the same way, like the interstate comes near us, but not through the downtown, and that's part of the reason why it's so charming. Some challenges. The old one is not user friendly. It's cumbersome, we heard. So just like all the places we work. The housing market's on fire, but single family housing putting stress on infrastructure, we've heard. Even though we've heard you haven't been building a lot, here recently. So we're gonna check that out because I'm hearing two different things. So I want to verify what's going on. Multifamily development is crushed due to minimum lot size requirements within the code. The downtown needs revitalization, but there's many barriers within the current zoning. There's the isolate here. The same thing that was a positive on one side is now a negative on this side. So that's kind of always the case, two sides to every coin. And then excessive parking requirements make stifle development opportunities. So we'll talk about parking and look at how that works. And, a lot of communities around the country are totally doing away with parking standards in their more urban areas and their downtown areas. And, I always find it interesting. So often cities are really hyper-focused on a couple of things. One being signage. I'm going to kick everyone's butt when it comes to signage. Like, that'll be the thickest part of most zoning ordinances. And I think, hey, have you seen the building it's attached to? Like, why are you so focused on the sign, right? And then the second thing is parking. Like, you must have this many parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of this use or that use. And it's like, where'd that number come from? I don't know. The next town over used that number, and it was a lot. So it sounds good. And so then you end up with massive parking lots in front of, commercial that it's empty. It doesn't need it. And so you have this inefficient land use. And now we're going, okay, well, how are we going to grow? Where are we going to grow? We're right out of land. I know, well, we'll infill, right? And so we say, well, where are we going to infill? Oh, there's a bunch of land right there. It's all covered in asphalt, but it's not being used for anything, right? So there's a place you can go. So we call it suburban retrofit. And so some of that stuff we can talk through, but I'll tell you one thing, having worked for developers for so long, nobody cares more about getting the parking right and having the right amount of parking than the developer. And they are much more scientific about it than any city or town or county has ever been. And so sometimes you think, well, they won't put any parking in if we don't make them. That is not true, I promise. I'm here to tell you, if they cannot park their customers or their residents or whatever, they go out of business. And they're more concerned about that than you are. So let's see, what else? Some of the goals we heard for the new zoning ordinance should be simplified. There we go. Align the code with the comp plan. Encourage smart growth, right? We've been hearing like growth, no growth, but here somebody qualified it by saying, let's make sure it's smart. Then fostering an environment where businesses can grow and industries can thrive. People talk about accelerating the permitting process to encourage investment. We've heard that it's a little bit hard to do stuff here. Now, we hear that in every place we go, just so you know. And the next town over, developers, oh, it's so hard to develop here, and it's way easy over in Rome. And then they come over here and it's like, oh, it's so hard to develop here, it's way easier. And so they just kind of pitch you against each other, right? And so, but at the end of the day, if it's not a little hard, I promise you're not going to get what you want, the vision that you have for the future, right? Because if it's not a little hard, that means you don't have standards that are high enough. And so we have to decide together how high you want that bar to be set. And then somebody today said to me, when talking about setting the bar high, what you can either limbo under it or you can, how's it go? I thought it was like catch your throat on it or something like that. So there's one way or the other. So, but I think, that's going to be the needle to thread. That's the fine balance strike. Because I always use the story. We were working in one community and they were just so excited. They said, we have really stuck it to the developers. Walmart over there came in, they wanted blue signs because that's their corporate colors, and we made them do green. What else? They have green signs. It's way better now, right? And I was like, well, kind of looks like Walmart to me, And so those are the kind of things like, don't pat yourself on the back too much. If you're making some tweaks and changes. We're working in one community right now. Say over and over, whatever we do, we don't want to be like next town over. And so, oh, cool. I hadn't been there yet. And so we're driving through the next town over, and I'm like, this is way better. What are you talking about? And I said, I had to ask him, what is it you don't want to be? Well, they're growing fast and they've got some traffic. And I said, besides your downtown is better than their downtown for sure, because they don't hardly have one. Well, what you both got outside of your downtown is a long corridors of suburban sprawl with strip malls and all of this stuff everywhere. And theirs is way better than yours because they have higher standards for materials and signage and architecture and all of that stuff. And so they're, you know, acting like they're way better, but it was really like their downtown was way better. And they really hanging their hat too much on that. And I see that. It happens in my town in Franklin. People, you know, say, we want to protect the character here and ask them what that character is. And when we really boil it down, they talk about 16 blocks of downtown. And outside of that, it's all sort of through osmosis and sort of the glow of downtown is hopefully making everything else cool. So you all have a great downtown. So hopefully we can, you know, make sure we don't rest on our laurels in that regard. But we don't want to make it so restrictive that you completely stifle growth, right? So there's a give and a take. So people said they want, the goal should be to update the future land use map or remove this Euclidean zoning, by the way, for those of you who are not zoning nerds and experts. That is that pod zoning based on uses that I was talking about earlier. And to allow smart growth and the mix of uses. Somebody said ensure transportation network can meet everyone's needs. And in that case, I think what they were talking about, everyone being people who are driving, people who are walking, people who are biking, etc. Creating livable and equitable communities throughout the county, and then preserving historic, cultural, and natural resources. So, timeline and next steps. This is the most important thing. If you don't do anything else, for those of you who are at home also, and for those who didn't participate, meaning now you have to go tell people what they missed out on. The Planapalooza is the most important part of the process. So what's going to happen is I'm going to come back and I'm going to bring a team of people. We're going to set up our office here for a number of days. I can't remember if we have dates yet, but 3, 4, 5 days in a row. We're going to set up. We're going to live here with all of you. We're going to immerse ourselves and understand this place as best we can. And the whole thing is going to be open. You can come in anytime. We're going to have meetings with different topics. And so this is a meeting about like infrastructure and utilities. I don't know why it was so well attended. People were excited to talk about utilities in that community. But we'll gather around the table. We'll have experts there from different departments of the city and the county, and it's just open. And I'm going to have a process where we're extracting information, trying to learn. You can ask questions. You can say, well, here's what we heard, and you know, here's something that's working for us, or you know, not working for us. And so it's not a time to come and like air your grievances and gripe about stuff. It's a time to come and like be constructive and work together to solve the problems, and recognizing that zoning can only do so much. So we'll have these technical meetings. There'll be a bunch of them. There'll be a schedule, the topics listed on there. Here's a picture. So this is my team. We came in. So the day before this picture was taken, this was an empty storefront in the main street. So it's like a legit office set up there. We'll have a hands-on workshop where people gather around the table, and you know, all of you and hopefully many others, and you know, draw on maps and you know, start to share with us ideas in a visual way. Hopefully we'll have fun. See, they're smiling, and so we want to we don't call it Planapalooza for nothing, right? You're not supposed to smile at the name because it's silly. It's supposed to, you know, actually be something you want to come participate in and come back to. And then we'll have some presentations too, because while we'll be there talking and learning, we'll also be working. Remember I talked about those plans. The areas will draw plans. We'll have our artists and renderings, and all of that will be presented through the process, and have a closing presentation at the end. And so you must come to that, and you have to carpool and bring like 5 people, right? I want to looking like a clown car in the circus. Y'all just piling out here doing a thing. There's a web page. So if you haven't been on there yet, it's unifiedrfcode.com. So go on there, and it's not just any old web page where you go to see when the next meeting is. It's actually interactive. And so if you miss an event, if you miss a meeting, if you miss some hands-on workshop, whatever, you can actually do those same exercises that the people who came in person did on the web page. And so we take all that information. And now, please, whatever you do, don't just do that instead. Like use that as a last resort. Because the thing that you miss out when you do it online by yourself, you don't hear what everyone else says and thinks. Because the funny thing is, people are always surprised when I get them around the table or in a group. People start sharing their ideas. they're shocked to know that not everyone agrees with them, right? It is really helpful for people to hear that, right? And so we want to make sure that people are getting that, and also the person next to you realizing that you may not agree with them, or you may, right? And so finding that common ground through the process is important. So here we go. So this is tonight. So we've been gathering data and we will continue to do so. The Planapalooza, I don't know if these dates are right, but they could be. Tentative is come on. Yeah, okay, so August 20th through 25th. So make sure you put that on your calendar. I don't see anybody writing, so I hope you all have good memories, but it's on the webpage. So then after the Planapalooza, we'll take all that information. We will start to refine what we've heard from the community. We'll start drafting the initial document. We'll have an open house at some point where we'll present it to you, and then we'll get feedback from that. We'll work on the final version, and we'll come back and present that as well. So I'm wrapping up here, I promise. Need to make sure that we're writing code that works for everyone. You're not just one thing, right? You've got this, which is amazing. And you've got some of this. This is actually isn't yours. This is mine. This is in Franklin, right near my house. But I love this picture so much. It illustrates rural, right? And so we've heard about how their regulations right now seem to really think about this place as one thing, as a monoculture, as one size fits all. And so you may live here and have the same standards applied to you that are here. And for heaven's sakes, wouldn't it be awful if vice versa? All of a sudden now, you end up having to, let's say you want to redevelop something down here. All of a sudden now your building's got to be way back and there's got to be a pasture in front of you or whatever. Like the context doesn't work. And so when we talk about context throughout this whole process, not one size fits all. We want to make sure that we've got something that works for all the policymakers so that people can get excited about what they're voting for, and that they feel good because they know that the community's participated and has gotten excited about it. So if the community comes in, they like, yeah, we've given our input on this. We feel like this is ours. We're excited about it. We understand it, and we need to move forward. We need to make sure we've got something that works for businesses too, right? Because imagine you're downtown with vacant storefronts. I'm guessing there has been a time where you haven't had to imagine that, right? So we'll make sure we have some that works for businesses, not just the downtown businesses. They're the most charming and most fun and all of that stuff, but also the businesses that are more utilitarian, that meet your sort of needs, that you might drive to, that aren't just walkable and fun, and the things that are more affordable. There are things that are bigger in scale, et cetera. And then talking about lifelong communities, right? Something for people well, for visitors, people coming in from out of town. Visitors are actually really good, right? Because they come in, they spend their money, and then they leave, right? And so you get the tax benefit, but you don't have to take care of all the other things, kids and services and all of that. So, but on the other hand, you can get tired of tourists roaming around, and so kind of take the good with the bad. And then also developers, right? We'll make sure that something works for developers, because assuming that you aren't literally going to not grow, right? Which is not possible, because if you don't grow, then you can't pay for the increase of cost of services over time, right? And so you have to have some growth. You want to make sure that you're doing something that works for them, so they're actually excited about giving you your vision, building it. It's a big risk for them to do it, so we want to make it easy, but not too easy. But the most important thing is that whatever we do has to represent the essence of ROME-FLOYD County. It can't just be what we did in Franklin, or what we did in Port Chester, New York, or any of the other dots on the map, right? I can't just do copy and paste, change the name. And so that's going to be super important. That's where all of you come in. This is where you hold us accountable, you teach us, you share with us, and you guide us, because we like I said, we can't know it like you do. So let's chat. Sorry to talk so long, but we have to start somewhere. Good examples of development that we could say, like, hey, if we're going to get development, it'd be awesome if sort of like this. You know, is the new development you're getting accomplishing your vision? Or are you more development? Not only do we not want to grow, but growing in this way that we don't like. Hopes, dreams, fears, aspirations, concerns, anything. So with that, I will stop talking and start listening. Who's first? Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Very quickly for the folks like me who can make, you just reintroduce yourself.
Yes. Yes, I'm Brian Rice. I'm the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative, and I'm leading the consulting team to help you all craft this new set of rules and regulations for your future. Yeah.
I have a concern and a dream.
All right. Okay.
My concern is that we are awesome downtown,
Right.
and if you go, a mile either direction, there's nothing attractive. And it feels like sometimes we try so hard to make sure that downtown is an awesome place for everybody to come, that we shut down the possibilities that there could be other centers of interest for people to go to in the county. Not even play out that, if you go out shorter or North Rome, there ought to be vibrant areas there where you can get a good meal and do some grocery shopping, maybe go to the gym. And there needs to be interconnectivity where you can walk or ride a bus or ride a bike. We've got this great trail through downtown, but it needs to be connected for everyone. So that's something that I think that we could do with the code that would make a difference. And improve everybody's quality of life, just the downtown. My dream is that we have a huge, underused, unappreciated asset in our airport.
I noticed that on the satellite picture.
It is, and we both come from an aviation background. I have aviation and public policy. And our airport easily be a vibrant commuter hub between Atlanta, Birmingham, and Chattanooga. I mean, we're right there in the center. Wouldn't it be lovely? And wouldn't it be attractive to businesses, big businesses, to be able to hop on their corporate plane or take an ASA pedal jumper, Southwest, whatever commuter type airline y'all want to bring in, but the runway's already big enough. Bring those in, you can hop over to the Birmingham airport and catch a cheaper flight, and you can get out of Atlanta and be on your way. You save the drive through I-75 in downtown Atlanta to the airport. Hotels, restaurants, shopping, all kinds of development that can go around that area. And our merchant needs it. People who live out there need those things nearby. They don't have to go into downtown for everything. So I think there's a real opportunity there.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And your first concern about once you leave downtown, I mean, one way you could look at it as a strategy to make your downtown look really good about making sure everything else doesn't, right? So that's a way to highlight it, right? But the airport, that's a really interesting idea, especially today, because we're to the point now where you can live anywhere and work anywhere. It's still sometimes it's nice if you need to go to the office or a meeting or whatever. But imagine if you're able to do that and just hop on a plane and fly to wherever. So that starts to meet some of the more executive kind of jobs that you might be looking to attract, and then also assuming that the airport gets more staff to support that. Now you're actually creating some jobs that will be needed in the community. So I think that's a great idea. Yes, sir.
Well, I made up my mind not to say anything tonight, but I said something this morning. But based upon what the lady said, I have to wholeheartedly agree. If you go from the center of town and drive down 4 corridors, our 4 high schools, it's depressing. It's depressing. There's nothing going on there. And there's a lot of factors there, don't get me wrong. But one thing that always bothers me, I think, and it's not the paper. On the paper, what you see is always about downtown. Everything in this county, pretty much, and I'm gonna get run out of town, it is about downtown, but it's not. Whenever you see 1-inch letters about a new restaurant opened up, that's because the restaurant prior to that closed down. You know, we've got to get that stuff like she talks about out more into the community, help the community. Because Rome, if the county continues to grow, it cannot take care of it on Broad Street. Now, there's a lot of buildings, there's a lot of stores in there that really need something that's in it, they really do. But we've got to think a little bit more outside the picture. So she's got a very valid point about some way on this code. I think needs to help the county and therefore the city to try to do something in those areas.
That's a good point, and I forgot that you mentioned that of not just having some good stuff, you know, in the downtown area, but if you think about a lot of cities around the country, they have their downtown. They also have neighborhood centers that kind of follow the same pattern, a little bit smaller scale, but still have some of the walkable kind of, you know, character, the charm. And maybe you go into downtown. Well, like my neighborhood is a good example. It's a new neighborhood based on these traditional, you know, design principles. But there's a neighborhood center that's mixed use, right? And so we've got in my new neighborhood that's 3 miles from historic downtown Franklin. We have a taco shop, we have a Chinese restaurant, we have a pub, we have a tavern, we have a doctor's office, a dentist's office, a hair salon, a dry cleaner, what else?
Grocery store.
Oh yeah, full-size grocery store. What am I thinking? Yeah. So we have all of that stuff, but it is all set up and designed like a walkable, not a strip mall or anything. It's like a sidewalks and street trees, and like you would recognize it as a historic neighborhood center that's new.
And we can't do that here.
Our zoning doesn't allow it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. The zoning doesn't allow it, and that's that, you know, that tradition of separating those uses, those pods, one from the next, because that's a commercial use and that's a residential use. And now here's the weird thing about it, though. Because for so long we were buying the suburban dream, if you go and say to somebody who may love what I just described, would it be okay if we added that to your neighborhood? They'd say, I don't think so. And you say, well, why not? Because what they would conjure up in their imagination will be some sort of a strip center or whatever that had all these things, because it's hard to imagine that people could build something today of the character that you might want to have again, like you have that today. And so we know how to easily adjust the ordinance to allow it. We'll have to figure out sort of delicately where people want it, where people are comfortable with it. And again, sort of, you know, the less dependent you want to be on your car, the more those kind of things become important. And so there's some good purpose for it. It's been.
I just wanted to add, most of those communities are walking communities. Most of the people walk or ride bicycles for several different reasons. And certainly, like she suggested, if they had some retail or some economic situation that they could take advantage of, and retail, the grocery stores and the other places that you mentioned, coffee shops and so forth, would definitely have growth in those communities that the people are looking for. But along with that, there needs to be improvement in housing for that environment, so that the people who live in those communities can enjoy those amenities, but also some of those communities, as she indicated, look like war zones. The houses deteriorated, and it needs to be built up. So I think the community at large needs to be considered. Amount to one angle, as you said, amount to the other, citywide. And you're right again that as a citizen, as a resident, most of our entertainment is based on coming downtown Rome. But unfortunately, on another angle, the community can be split. Who actually goes downtown and enjoys that? So if you don't actually go downtown, then there's nowhere else to go. And so we don't get the benefit of the community type environment or socialized environment because of just being one area and one area that everybody can go to.
Good point.
One point, I want to make
Okay.
another one later on.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, sir.
So I just kind of want to piggyback off of a lot of what everybody else has said too. But one thing that growing up here has kind of shown me is that we'll say growing up by neighborhoods, a lot of these popular areas have their own kind of culture and feel. And so to kind of expand on that as well and have a center for themselves inside of them, like Shannon feels different from Archie, whereas Coosa feels different from Glendale. To expand and have kind of a epicenter or a city, I guess you'd say a neighborhood center for those areas too could be beneficial as well, and expand on that. And in my professional experience, development sparks development. And so, this is more of a question. In your opinion or experience, what is something that can be like minor tweaks or minor things that we as citizens, and I see like elected officials and staff here could do to try to adjust things to spark redevelopment in these areas that wouldn't be so heavy or detrimental to the character that's already there for these neighborhoods?
Yeah, great question. So we're working in Spartanburg right now, South Carolina, on their comprehensive plan. And in Spartanburg, they had a few different things going on. They had they have a kind of a neat downtown, that's been really kind of up and coming. But to your point, not everybody goes downtown, right? Not where everybody wants to be. And a lot of tourists and different people will come from there. Sort of, if you live in this neighborhood, you might go over there because it's close or whatever, but not everybody. And so they also had issue of food deserts in the neighborhood. So a place where people couldn't get good, healthy food. And so there, what we did was they had built this community garden area and had a market that was part of it, that where you actually sell produce from the community garden. It was managed and all, and said, you know what, like, that's really cool, and that solves the food desert problem and all that, or works for it at least. So like, what if that became like a neighborhood center concept, and you started getting one of those called a food park in every neighborhood as the center, and then other stuff to grow up around it. But it was kind of a really neat way to do something that, that just the aesthetics of the community garden and the little market building and stuff were cool to themselves. And so it was a kind of an easy thing to do. The other thing was, a lot of times, even if you don't have a commercial center to a neighborhood, you would have had an identifiable center, which would have been at least a civic space or a neighborhood park. And a lot of places we go, we find they don't have those, neighborhood scale park. And so there's a lot of times to focus on a big park, so everybody's going to come downtown again. It's like, well, let's get neighborhood scale things. And so I think the scale of things becomes important. But a lot of times too, the zoning already has some neighborhood supporting commercial kind of in close proximity to a neighborhood. A lot of times not in the real center where you might want it to be, but it's all allowed to be kind of more of the suburban strip model, which doesn't sort of add to the livelihood, the character, and the charm of the neighborhood. And so there's some things we can do. It's not an easy question to answer, but it's a good question to ask, so we can start to sort through it together. Because most importantly, so far I'm hearing the idea of having some of these neighborhood centers might be exciting to people, and really, as we're going through our process, maybe one of the things that we'll lay out and draw and do artist renderings of so people can see it is like how you might do that in a neighborhood where there's not one currently. And so that people can decide whether or not they want to. Some neighborhoods may say, no, thank you, that's not for us. And other neighborhoods may say, that's awesome, we would love that, and it would solve problems for us and make a center for us and all these things. And so again, not having one size fits all solution will be important in this process, but hopefully I'll get a better answer for you as we go and I learn more.
We've got a comment in
Oh, good.
the chat.
Great.
So the comment is, the code needs to be revised to make development costs more affordable. Example, all roads built must be to a standard that the county does not follow on the majority of its roads. We are trying to develop 10 lots on 160 acres, and if we follow the code, the road would cost $700,000. That adds $70,000 to the cost of the lot before the purchase land and build. Most people cannot afford this.
So if you couldn't hear that, he was talking about the costs of development and infrastructure to meet sort of standards that may be sort of oversized for what the development opportunity is. And that's one of those things that's hard, you know, it's hard sometimes to sort out for smaller scale developers. A lot of places we work, if you're a big developer, you've got big money, big resources to do stuff, it's no problem, no big deal. If you're smaller scale, if you're an individual, if you want to do something with your property, it's really hard. An example we see all the time is, you know, you end up with a lot of communities are looking for opportunities, kind of like the one I described in Hard Bargain, where they were able to use the back of their lot that they weren't using, and they kind of split their lot in half, front to back, not side in the middle. And so there, from the homeowner's perspective, it was a huge financial win for them, right? That what they thought was not valuable to them now had value. And but to do it, you had to go through this whole process. You had to go through all the permits and you know, first you had to try to read the zoning, for heaven's sakes, right? And so that's its own thing. And you know, I don't know what this says really. Do I get an engineer, or a planner, or an architect? What do I do? And so you don't know, but a developer knows how to do it. And so a lot of communities now are focusing on what they're calling kind of lean development, so that you start to try to simplify the process for smaller scale individuals or small developers. And you know, somebody may not even consider themselves a developer, but wants to develop something that they have. And there's some ways where if there's benefit to the community, if you're looking for opportunities to add some density or whatever, then you know, maybe you waive your permit fees or whatever, you know, just little things like that that you can do that in the scheme of the city's finances won't make any difference much, but to an individual could be a huge, whether or not they could do a development or not, and maybe change their life, you know. So there's some things that we can think through this process. As we learn more, I'll hopefully have better answers. Yes, in the back there.
One of the things that you're gonna run into in our community is folks need to see a transparent process. Okay, and I think this is a great start, personally, but that's gonna be tough for some folks. The other thing that everybody, I think, is going to see is equality across the board. Like has been mentioned, it can't all be for Broad Street.
Yeah.
And I know as someone who lives in the county just barely, even we feel that way. And I can walk to Broad Street from my house, but even we kind of feel that way at times, that we've been kind of left behind. Some of that's our own doing. I realize that a lot of other folks don't realize that, but that's a couple of the things that I really hope that y'all do a good job of, not just you, everybody, because that's something that would make this way harder than it needs to be. And folks think this is being done behind closed doors in this community, they will not handle it well.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that. Normally when somebody says we want a transparent process, and they follow by saying, why is nobody here? You didn't advertise this, all these things, and you didn't do that, and I appreciate that. Here's the funny thing about a window, right? You can see through it, but only if you walk up and look through it can you see what's on the inside. I just made that up, by the way. So I've been waiting my whole career to come up with that one because I get so frustrated. I'm like, man, you know, it's shocking to me when we're doing something like this and we don't have standing room only, right? There's a lot going on, right? The world's different than it was just a year or two ago. And so, you know, people are like, oh my goodness, I can get out now and go do something. The last thing I want to do is go sit in here and hear you talk about zoning, right? And so I get that. Hopefully people will, at their leisure, go back and watch these recordings because it'll be out there on the webpage. But we work in maybe in a smaller town, do the exact same process to get the word out and make similar materials and all, and you may get standing room only. And you go to a bigger city, same process, all that, and people don't show up. And so it's a weird thing. Like there is no formula we figured out even after all these years. Now, what I do is my best, hopefully y'all are seeing it here, is once I get you in the room, I'll make you want to come back, right? And even if we are talking about zoning. And so, and hopefully you'll tell people about it. But the transparency is only as transparent as people take advantage of it and look through. So I will chastise all people who did not come tonight and say, you're not taking advantage of this process that the city and county have put forth for you. That's one of the reasons I think they hired us, because we focus on the process, not just the product. And so it's important to me. When I was in college, I used to play in bands. And there was nothing worse than getting up there and having like 3 people in the crowd. Right? I have to like work myself up. I was so thankful as y'all started coming in from it, you know, okay, great. You know, because it's hard to get up your energy to go through it all when there's only a few people. So the more people, the better I do too. So bring friends. Yes.
I think a lot of people need educating about what zoning can do for you.
Yeah.
I think that's part. And maybe that's something no one can do, but it would, to me, it would be wonderful if there was some way to have zoning that would not permit things to look like Turner and Hall looks, and to gradually get rid of what's there. I don't know how to encourage that. It may just take money, but I don't know. We seem to focus too much on letting people do whatever's inexpensive because, oh, we need whatever developed. It's a Circuit City picture.
Yeah.
And not enough on how's it going to look, what's the quality going to be, how's it going to fit.
Yeah, it's hard. You know, we're working in the community right now, and they're chasing rooftops because they think that the rooftops, the commercial uses and industrial uses will look for how many people live there and they'll come and you'll get that. But at the end of the day, because preferences of people have changed now, and they're more worried about the character and the charm of a place, and you know, like you can get a, let's say Apple's going to relocate here. They're going to move headquarters, and Tim Cook and all the folks are going to come here, and they're going to be. And then Apple says, "All right, we're hiring," and then people say, "There, right?" Like I went outside your downtown. Ooh, that's not my kind of place, right? I'm just making this up here, right? This is not this is a theoretical person. But the idea is that you have to make that habitat that place that people want. And so I think as we move forward, we have to figure out, how do we balance that? It's a balancing act through this process. And it's not easy when you've got to worry about the economic concerns and considerations of it. That's what you're responsible for. It's easy as a citizen. Like we hear all the time, like, "Hey, Mr. Developer, what I'd like for you to develop is a park on that piece of property." And the developer's like, "That's fine. Here's how much I pay for it. You're welcome to buy it from me." And so it's as a citizen, it's easy to have these ideas in mind. And so what I really strive to do is to take those thoughts and concerns and dreams and try to balance them with, and I go back and say, okay, well, how important it is for you to get Circuit City or Best Buy or whatever, and steal them away from the next town over, or, are we really, can we focus on, and I learned today, so excited to hear that the Chamber of Commerce is really focused on workforce, you know, and finding housing and creating housing opportunities for the workforce, because they know that now those companies follow the people. Used to, people would say like, oh, where do I want to work? And this company, oh, I'll move there. Not anymore. You know, people are all about experiences, right? Somebody was talking to me today and they said, you know, for a while, I'm used to, in a certain generation, we were about things. Whoever has the most stuff at the end of the day wins, right? And now it's experience. And I'll take a lower salary if I can have freedom to travel, right? And so now if you want to negotiate with an employee, you say, well, I'm gonna give you more days off. And that's what's important. So it's like a whole paradigm shift. And so we have to figure out how to make that experience come back to that character. And wouldn't you know, we're going to be focusing on character in the zoning. So hopefully we'll get there, right? Yes, sir.
And we're looking at changing zoning to invigorate and make vibrant communities. Rome and Floyd County has an awful lot of poverty. Some of the best areas, especially in the city of Rome, poverty areas, and that they would be the very best places to build, to redevelop. How do we protect the poverty? How do we protect against gentrification? Stay. But is that something that can be built into zoning? Is that going to be up to the city commission, the county commission? Those folks, once we do get zoning that promotes good growth, how do we protect people who are here? We're going to be.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that we're asked all the time. And the project I mentioned in Spartanburg, the comprehensive plan we're doing for Spartanburg, it's the first ever equity-based comp plan in the country to be written, right? And so it's something that we've been getting a lot of, you know, good experience in trying to sort through these things. But the hard part is when you have an area that is impoverished, like you mentioned, the land values tend to be lower. And so when you're a developer, you're looking at that, you're going, oh, well, here's where it costs less to do my development, right? And at the end of the day, though, when you start looking at the results of it, it starts looking like somebody had targeted that area, you know, that there was some sort of a sinister motive in that process. At the end of the day, the developer is driven by profit, you know, even if they are a sinister person. If they can go develop over here in some other area, they'll do that. Luckily, most developers aren't sinister. But nonetheless, one of the things that we do is focus on making sure that development has that diversity component. And when I say diversity in development, I mean diversity of housing types, price points, and all of that stuff. Now, that's one thing that solves a problem for people who need housing, who may want to move here or may want to move from here to there. But it doesn't solve the problem of somebody who doesn't want to move, right? And so now let's say, and this is where it gets really tricky, okay? If you have a piece of property and you've had it in your family for generations, and you're kind of to the point where no one's super, you know, committed to that neighborhood anymore, or you're ready to, you know, the property values have gone up over time, so you're ready to capitalize on that and cash in. And now we come in and say, well, we want to make sure we don't gentrify the neighborhood, so we're going to put these things in place that don't allow you to do so. All of a sudden, that person who was counting on, like, yes, I'm excited about this, I want to take advantage of this real estate market, is now had all their dreams dashed. And I'll use a different example that's less charged. We see the same phenomenon happen with agricultural land. And so when you're driving through Franklin, when you're coming into town, there's all these great farms that are like, you know, 300 years old, beautiful farms, and so beautiful horses and cows, and I love it. So pretty, and take a picture, you know, all of that. And so those who drive through there say, let's preserve the farmland. That's part of the character of Franklin. let's make sure that the comprehensive plan and the zoning don't allow you to develop that farm. And it will always be a farm. Farmer says, wait a minute. And more importantly, farmer's kids say, that's our inheritance. We were planning on selling that farm because we're not farming anymore. I don't know if you had noticed that. And so now we have made the zoning do this thing that we thought everyone would want it to do. And so I always say when we're worried about those sorts of things, either rural conservation or gentrification of neighborhoods, we need to make sure that, just like with everything else, we're not doing a one-size-fits-all thing. If somebody wants to be able to capitalize on the value that's been created in their property, we want to make darn sure that, you know, we're not taking that opportunity away from somebody. That said, we don't want to create a situation where someone has to sell, have to move. They have to leave the neighborhood they've been in for generations. There's not an easy answer. And so we're going to work through it together as a community to try to figure out where do we fall on the spectrum. You know, if you live in a neighborhood and you're excited about the opportunity of, you know, like I've been hearing all this about your minimum lot size, right? So the minimum lot size discussion. And so, you know, some people could say, well, if we allow the minimum lot size to be reduced, then now all of a sudden it's going to cause development pressure. Developers are going to come in, and now it's going to increase the value of the property around me. Now my taxes are going to go up, and now I may not be able to afford to live in my neighborhood I've lived in forever. Well, the only way that developers are doing things in the neighborhood is if somebody decided they wanted to sell to the developer, right? And so that's the thing. So somebody, you know, the ripple effect starts. And so we have to just kind of work together. I mean, there's something, you know, one thing you could think of, if you're going to reduce the lot size, then, you know, maybe the requirement is that it's replaced with an affordable housing. So you're getting that density, but you're now, you know, embedding in it the affordability. Well, sounds like a great idea, but it may not be. It may cause a problem, right? And so, like, these things are very difficult to sort through because there, you know, has a tendency to feel like something is being done to someone through a process. So we want to make sure that that is not ever the case. And we want to make sure that we are being thoughtful about what we're doing, that we're not just sort of shooting from the hip. One of the things that I've been doing for our work in Spartanburg is looking around the country at best practices. Like who's dealing with this in the best way? What are the different ways that it's being addressed? And there are so many ways. And what that tells me is there's no one answer. And so we have to figure out how to calibrate it to the community, to what the needs are, what the desires are. And in hard bargain, sorry, I can go back to Franklin, it's just on my mind. The hard bargain was an interesting example because the organization was a nonprofit that came to help in the neighborhood. It was started by a local preacher who moved his family into the neighborhood. He said, if I'm going to help the neighborhood, I want to be in the neighborhood. I want to know what's going on here. I don't want to just be outside and whatever. So they all moved in and been living there. And so they start off by fixing up houses. And then they kind of got to the point where they came around to having us help them on this master plan. And the nonprofit, one of the things I said to them was, you know, like, this is a really great neighborhood. Like, really, a lot of the issues are just maintenance. It's just a maintenance issue, you know, a little pain, a little this, a little that. It's great. And so actually, if you allowed some market rate housing in the neighborhood, it could actually be a beneficial thing, because one of the things that we've learned over the years is that you don't want to group concentrate poverty, right? It's just, you know, so best practice in planning is to have mixed income neighborhoods, right? So, but it's hard to accomplish because once you put that market rate housing in, now everything else start going up. And so now we're like, we do deed restrictions, we do this. It's hard, but it's, you know, lots of smart people have been thinking about it. So hopefully we'll come up with something that works here.
One of the scenarios you mentioned about development coming in, city just happened. Right after, very quick, and community around that area, get that stopped. It's gonna be that complex. It's not more broad. Single residential area. We're gonna have mixed use developments. Those with zoning law codes deal with that sort of scenario. Inclusive to the whole project. Handle code piece by piece.
Yeah, you would hope not. You hope that it's thought of holistically. And so to your point about mixing different housing types within a neighborhood. I mean, you can go to any of your favorite historic neighborhoods, and what you'll see is you walk around and there's like, oh, there's this big single family house, and then there's a small single family house. No, maybe there's some townhouses. I mean, the historic ones, not the ones that are, a house with no town called townhouses, right? And so, and then, maybe you have an apartment house, got 4, 6, 8 units in it, fits right in next to single family houses. And so used to people knew how to mix this stuff all up in a way that just made it actually more interesting. You didn't even notice it. Unfortunately, like you just described, an apartment complex. Once you start making apartment complexes, and we're meaning the same thing, that never fits into a neighborhood, right? If you just sort of sprinkle around some multifamily housing with parking lots all around it, that doesn't fit in anywhere with any character, right? And so multifamily is okay, and it can work right next to single family if the form and the character is prescribed by the zoning ordinance, and we can do that. So, yes.
Well, I certainly don't want to come across anti or anything like that, because I certainly agree with what the city and county are trying to do. And so I don't want to go cold water on it. But I'm honestly having a problem understanding in a broad brush how zoning can help us get to the different communities like envision and like I've seen before. I need a little more explanation on that, because I just don't know how you're going to turn that around.
Come to the plan of Palooza.
I will be.
All will be revealed. Because right now, like for instance, you asking the question shows me you're intrigued, at least, right? You're not going like, oh, that sounds terrible, right?
We need help.
Yeah. So did you have something to add? Yeah. Did you?
Okay, I did what I want to get.
Oh, okay.
I did get.
So I was just gonna say, anybody like silently freaking out in their seat about anything I'm saying right now? Like, don't be bashful. Like, I really need to know the things that you hate more than the things that you love about what I'm saying.
I think a lot of us are just silently freaking out, but it's
Oh,
positive silent freaking out. I think
I'll
solid percentage.
okay.
Positive.
That sounds good. I like that. Yes.
So I'm a county commissioner, and I like to remind folks that Rome is in the county. So we love our downtown, and we appreciate the many benefits our downtown has. But I love what some folks are saying here, that we also have distinct communities out in the county. I tend to think they kind of revolve around a school. And I think we can build on that. And I think we need to bring back that whole neighborhood feel. And we lost our front porches from houses today. They mostly are in the back. And we want to get back on the front porch. I'm a big strong towns proponent. And I just want to see ways that we can grow our community in a smart way, but also in a very friendly way. We want to bring back neighborhoods. We want to bring back pride in our communities and pride in our county. And I think we can do that through zoning, but also through other aspects of our city and county. Yes, our airport is a hidden gem. It is phenomenal, and we love it. We love what's happening out there. We want to continue to grow that. We understand that we have poverty here. We're not alone. We know that a lot of communities have poverty, and we think we can help in those ways. But I agree that we are also lacking in that missing middle housing. We lost it at some point over time, and we can bring that back. And I think those are important things for us to consider. So I'm excited about this process. And for those of you who showed up tonight, thank you. It tells me you care about your community, but next time we need to have standing room only. We need folks to care about this. It's important. It's important for us, but it's more important for our children, our grandchildren who come behind us. So I think this is a special place where we live, and I think we can do some really great things here.
And if anybody is not familiar with this missing middle idea that I just mentioned, so it's basically, it means the middle means two things. So it's sort of middle income a lot of times, because a lot of times communities work in focus a lot on affordable housing. And then to offset that, developers are doing like a lot of $1 million, penthouses and, and so you have a lot of them on both ends, but there's some missing in the middle, that middle income and also middle scale. So it's kind of like, not single family, because you got a lot of that. So if you start getting into things like duplexes or townhouses or apartment houses that I just described, not apartment complexes, and some of those kind of things as well. So, and we'll talk about that through the process, through the plan. So, yes.
I think that this process, I really appreciate the detail you put into your overview, but I think there are still a lot of people who haven't thought about these concepts and have an image that there's tension in the community between keeping things the way they've always been and recognizing that they haven't always been the way they are now, right? Even though you want to think right now is the way they've always been, right? At some point, somebody decided they weren't going to be a cute little community that's all close together, and that generations change what they want. And if all of us have this 50 years ago feeling of what we want, that's not necessarily going to serve us well 50 years from now. And that there are some things old can be new again. Some things that are old just need to be gone.
Yeah. And that's a great point. The thing that I'm a student of history. I love history. I love, like, one of the first things I do is go find old historic maps of a place and old photographs, and I study them and try to understand how the place grew over time. So often, people's conception of their place is the way it was the day they moved in or the day they were born, and it's stuck there. And growth happens, and so we grew, But to your point, and I take it all the way back, like, think about the first person who settled here. There's like a log cabin somewhere. That was it. That was this place, right? And then your Broad Street probably had a livery stable and a farrier putting horseshoes on things. You have dirt roads and wooden sidewalks, and and there were separate buildings. And this place that people love so much as downtown was nothing like it is now, and so as we look at that, there's a new tendency, actually. This is not something that you would see in the past. It's a new tendency to take a snapshot in your mind and stop things where they are. Used to, people would say, oh my gosh, if we could get some more people to move here, then we could get a school, we could get a church, we could get a sidewalk, we could pave the streets. And then so they were like, think about trying to get people and attract them. And it was like an exciting thing. Now, that said, it isn't fair to compare today to yesterday or to history, because the way that we grow and develop now is different. It's industrial scale a lot of times, right? If you get a national builder in here and they're cranking out tract houses, boom, 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 and the care of design, craftsmanship of the buildings, it's not the same. And so you can't just say, well, we've always been growing. And so, like, maybe if when we trade the way it is today for the way it might be tomorrow, it's at least a fair trade, if not trading up. Who will get behind it? Get excited about it? So I always think about like there's the woods over here, and the woods get cut down and it becomes 100 oaks mall, right? In honor of the 100 oaks that used to be there, right? And that was not a fair trade. You lost this beautiful scenic thing, and yeah, there's some convenience in the thing that came. But if you got a center, neighborhood center, town center, or whatever, in place of it, you wouldn't miss those darn trees quite so much, because you'd also replace them with 200 street trees, right? And so now your forest is just transformed into a place. And so there's some different ways we can think about it, but let me come back to you. I know you had a second point. You said you wanted to wait, so I'm done yapping.
Well, some of the places that based on your vision, that I visited, South Road, Boston, Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Harlem, Brooklyn, West Oakland, and focus on Auburn Avenue and Kirkwood, and Midtown in Atlanta. They went about the business of what you're saying, identifying what would be great for those particular markets and being able to focus on development. And they did that. However, the problem that it raised for the long-term citizens, long-term residents, generational, is that they went about the shared land issue and so forth. But it moved out a lot of the long-term generational owners due to higher taxes, aggressive pursuit of ownership of those lands. When they brought in the businesses like coffee shops and so forth, they moved out the mom and pop businesses. The neighborhood became split between character and personality of the have and have not, and also the availability of loans for those residents versus the new developers and so forth that came in, and real estate costs and infrastructure taxes, and who could continue to be in those markets. It drove the cost of real estate up so that the people, and then as someone mentioned, transportation, so they redirected transportation so that those long-term residents couldn't even get back into those communities. And then the unfortunate part was the cost of the real estate was so high that they couldn't come back once the areas were renovated. They couldn't come back and purchase any other properties. Those in those cities that I mentioned. Now, several of my family members are into community, that's their profession is community development, especially in California. So what's happening also is that China, Japan, other countries are coming in and being able to finance some of this development, which means that they have income. And I'm sorry if I'm not articulate, because this is not my forte, this is just my observation. So they're coming in, being able to invest money with developers here and developing, I don't care how much money you got in America, how wealthy you are, they are being able to economically support redeveloping the community. So that's been the problem. So you go to Midtown Atlanta, you go to different places, nothing about those communities are the same. That's just a comment. The other thing is, back in the day, the old heads that were here, these communities were developed. North Rome had hospitals, doctors, dentist office, they had nightclubs, restaurants, but for whatever reason, which updates me, they don't have those communities anymore. So the concern is, how can they, these citizens be a part of the same community, but take advantage of the growth, be a part of the growth as well.
Yeah. But one of the things that we talked about in Spartanburg was, if you are, I know exactly what you mean. I get it. One of the things we talked about in Spartanburg was, if you're going to make a neighborhood center, like bring in stuff that businesses and people who live in the neighborhood already, right? And so it's like, it's pretty obvious if you're, that gentrification is happening if you're bringing in something that isn't at all patronized by the people who live around it, who could easily walk to it, right? It's hard, because you can't, especially with zoning, and the city doesn't, or the county doesn't have any control over what business goes in what, and so there's some of that. But if you can be intentional about it, if you can, got developer A and developer B who may want to come in and do something. And developer B says, you know what, I'm going to do stuff that's like culturally appropriate in this neighborhood, and I really want to focus there. Then let's head their direction rather than A. And so what we can find is there's some ways to sort of put that out there too. Like in Spartanburg, they did these neighborhood plans for each neighborhood. It was very specific and really, got into a greater level of detail of community input than we're able to in this citywide process, but the countywide process. And the there though, you could very clearly articulate what exactly are you looking for? What stores, what types of businesses, whatever in the neighborhood center. Here we get into our neighborhood center is okay. And now we can go from there. Once we figure out the zoning and allow it, then maybe some of those follow-up more specific plans could come forth and you're able to specify what you're looking for. But at the end of the day, the one thing that's wonderful about changing preferences of people is that you see people are much more interested in cultures that are outside of their own, right? And so one of the reasons why businesses move out of a different area is not because they were moved out. It's again, back to the dollar, right? They say, well, if I'm not able to stay in business here, then I'm going to move my business elsewhere. That's why some places carry on, have really good vitality for years and generations, no matter what the demographics of the community are. And so if we're looking at those opportunities to try to focus on those centers that are neighborhood specific, and they're focused on the neighbors, but you also can bring in people from other neighborhoods that are patronizing, helping those businesses stay in business. But if the neighborhood centers are small enough in scale and the businesses are small enough, they don't have to have a bunch of people come in and patronize them to stay in business. And so we need to make it. Well, you do, but I'm saying like square footage wise, if you have, a really big shop, for instance, and like the zoning requires your building to be too big, and you gotta have tons of scale. Right, so the scale, neighborhood scale becomes important. And then finding ways to, maybe be creative with what a neighborhood center can be like. What a building, like back to how cities and towns grow over history. Think about it, when they first came in and built the first commercial buildings in any city or town, what do? They built a rectangular box and they put a neat storefront and they kind of like a Wild West, stage set, right? And that was it. But from the streetscape, it looked great and it's cheap. It's, so maybe there's some ways that we can, do things that don't diminish the character and quality and the standards that you all want to, as a community, put forward. You can actually have a greater impact with something that costs less than doing something more. So there's some ways that we want to try to think through that together to make these places be viable neighborhood centers for the neighbors.
Is there any way to help revitalize neighborhoods like North Los, which is now still on the John Highway, which is done in the 50s. But I mean, that community was but surely there are ways to regenerate without ripping up the highway.
Yeah, I mean, that does get beyond the zoning, but what you can do is make sure that what you're doing on both sides is compatible. And, you said, well, without ripping up the highway, but I mean, you'd be surprised how many places now are undoing the things that were done. And so we want to make sure that character is staying compatible for the day that maybe it happens and it all comes back together. In the meantime, comprehensive plan can focus at a higher level on integrating, stitching those things together with things like tunnels or overpasses. All right, this has been awesome. I don't know what time we're supposed to stop, but usually I say I'll sit here and talk as long as y'all want to, but I know y'all probably need to eat dinner. So thank you so much for coming, for participating tonight. You need to shame all your friends who didn't come, friends and family, bring them with you. Next time we're going to be checking the parking lot to make sure nobody's driving by themselves. And we'll keep this process going. Plan-A-Palooza, it's so important. You have to come participate in that as much as you can.
Brian, what instrument will you be playing? Will you mention you were in a band? We'll drum up some.
Right, right. Well, you ever seen those guys with the drum and the cymbals and the, all this? That's me.
We'll still take it straight.
Right, one-man band, and thankfully I'll bring the crew. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Good job.